We are excited to announce over 220 pre-registered attendees are set for today, which is an all-new record. TechNation is proud to offer these free webinars as a way to educate and provide valuable information to the healthcare technology industry. Thanks to your continued support, we will now be offering 3 webinars monthly beginning in August. We will always schedule the most sought-after and dynamic speakers in the profession. We would like to mention that many of these same speakers and presentations are being held at our tri-annual MD Expo, our next one being the inaugural MD Imaging Expo in Indianapolis, July 16th and 17th. Please visit theimagingexpo.com for the entire educational schedule. And remember, admission to all of the MD Expos is always complimentary for hospital employees, military, and students. Our next webinar will be a special roundtable discussion on what's new in X-ray test equipment on July 9th. Our panel will include representatives from Radcal Corporation, Unfor's RaySafe, RTI Electronics, and Flute Biomedical. Be sure to register early for this event because the first 100 people to attend and submit the post-webinar survey will receive a limited edition Wednesday webinar t-shirt. Okay, a few notes before we begin. Your participation today makes you eligible for 1.5 CE credits. You will see a post-webinar survey about today's presentation immediately once the webinar ends. We will email you your certificate with the CE credits within 1 week of today's event. In today's webinar, all lines will be muted, but you can submit questions anytime during the presentation by using the questions feature on the dashboard on the right-hand side of the screen. If you have any difficulty, please feel free to email us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Okay, without further ado, we are privileged and honored to introduce our presenter today, Frank Magnarelli of Clinical Technology Management. Frank has over 30 years of experience developing and managing single and multi-hospital-based biomedical programs in the U.S. and the Middle East. His experience also includes managing service for medical device manufacturers. Today, he will share with you how to be a customer service leader in your hospital. Frank, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, John, and thank you, folks, for attending today. I just want to give you a brief overview of how this will be constructed. The first 10 minutes of this discussion will talk about your customer, why service is important, and once we finish that, we will get down into the nitty-gritty, the actual things you as a department can do to grow and become the customer service leader in your hospital. The first thing I want to talk about, so I'm certain we're all on the same page, is who is your customer? And for our purposes today, that's the person who calls on you for service. So those are physicians, nurses, technicians, either imaging or laboratory techs. But these are the people that you provide services for on a daily basis. And everyone in the hospital, just like you, has internal customers. You, for instance, are a customer of Material Services. They process your purchase requests and provide deliveries of parts to you. Fiscal Services does your timesheets and budgets. HR, your PR requests and educational reimbursement. So within the institution, although the hospital's customer is the patient, your customer is the person you provide services for. It's known as the internal customer. Now, why should you even care about customer service? And this happens to be an old film that I'm referencing called The Big Night. It's about 2 brothers who migrate from Italy to open a restaurant in New York. The older brother, Primo, the chef, is widely renowned as one of the world's great chefs. He has a problem, though. He refuses to cook what his customers like to eat. If any of his customers suggest that something should be done a little differently, he will go out onto the restaurant floor and chew them out. So the fact that he doesn't listen to his customer winds up hurting the restaurant because they start losing customers rapidly, and the restaurant goes into bankruptcy. So the point is this is, your opinion of yourself and your department doesn't matter. It's your customer's opinion that counts. You can have the best technicians, fancy computerized management system, top test equipment, meet all your Joint Commission requirements, have good benchmarking numbers, save great money. But if your customer doesn't feel that you care about them, then all of what you do doesn't matter. You can also argue, my job is secure. Where are they going to go for service? Well, we all know from reality that every department in the nation has to keep an eye out for being outsourced. And we're undergoing some critical budgetary cutbacks in healthcare at the time. So if your customers have a good opinion of you, you're less likely to suffer personnel cutbacks and budgetary cutbacks for travel and education. So much depends on what your customers feel about you. And when we talk about customer service, this happens to be the results of a study that were done recently, and I'm sorry I forgot to give attribution to it in this slide. But the primary reason people change service providers is because they feel that the customer doesn't care for them. 68%, almost 7 out of 10 people, dropped their service providers because they felt the customer didn't care. You notice only 14% felt that the customer was dissatisfied with the service. So it demonstrates you can have the best possible technicians servicing well, but if the customer doesn't believe you care about them, they will drop the service. So with all that in mind, the goal number one of any organization and any department should be to have customers who believe that you are dedicated to providing them with the best possible service. Now, I believe so strongly in this that we had this printed up and framed outside the door to our department. So every day coming into work, it was a reminder of what our number one goal was. And I'd recommend people do that because this has to become part of your culture. Now the question you ask is, how do I achieve great customer service? And this gets about to the last bit of theory we need to talk about. Ted Levitt's a marketing professor up at Harvard, and he tried to determine what it was that made organizations have intense customer loyalty. He noticed that there were some companies that no matter what they did, their customers followed them. And he broke the organizations into 3 parts. Their generic product, and that's what that target-looking thing is, their generic product, which was their fundamental service, their expected product, which was how the customers evaluated them, and then the augmented product, which was service above and beyond what was expected. And he found that it was product augmentation that caused great customer loyalty. Now let's see what this means in terms of biomedical programs. Your generic service is repair, planned maintenance, calibration, you meet your Joint Commission requirements, you do your EOC reports. But basically, that's what everyone listening here does. This is your generic service. No matter how well you do them, you're still doing what everyone else does. The expected service is how your customers measure you, and that's the speed of response. Is your work of good quality? Do you have to get called back for repeat calls because you didn't do it right the first time? Are reports on time? Do you do your committee assignments? Basically, this is how well you perform your generic service in the eyes of your customer. But the augmented service, and this is what we're going to spend most of the afternoon talking about, is the service that no one else performs. Nobody in the hospital performs augmented services, and no other biomedical program that you're aware of performs this. So what is an augmented service? And I'll give you an example of something from outside the industry. It's thinking out of the box, really. In 1920, Ford had 60% of the automobile market. There were 20-something manufacturers out there. And it was 60% of the market share. That meant 3 out of 5 automobiles on the street were Fords. General Motors decided that they would like to become the market leader, and they set a 10-year plan to do it. Now, both companies had a generic product. They made cars. They were inexpensive, reliable. Both companies sold through a dealer network. Perhaps the only difference was, as Henry Ford is famous for saying, you can have any color as long as it's black. GM did offer many colors, but basically they both made and sold cars. So what did GM do to surpass Ford. What could they do to augment their services and do something thinking way out of the box that was unique? GM came up with financing. They offered low monthly payments and made it easy for customers to get into cars. Ford thought it was a joke and didn't go along with that. And of course, by this augmented service, making it easy for their customers to buy cars, within a 10-year period, General Motors surpassed Ford and took over the leadership in automobile sales in the U.S. and eventually in the world. The irony of this all is when GM went into bankruptcy a few years ago, the one division of General Motors that was making money was their GMAC finance program. But the point is, here was a company that made cars, but they augmented, they did something no one else does, and they surpassed their competition. So this brings us to the question, and this is we'll get down into the day-to-day operations of a biomedical program. What can you do that is especially unique that no one else is doing? And the first thing we did when we decided to augment our program was we wanted to get to know our customer. So we went to the vice president of nursing and said, we would like a liaison. We would like someone from nursing to come to our department meetings, to attend them regularly and bring nursing issues to us and advise us from a nursing perspective of what we could do. And we would also, that person would also take our issues back to nursing. The VP of nursing loved this idea, and she made one recommendation to us. She said, I would rather not have just one person. What I'd like to do is rotate the liaison person, have a nurse manager from each of our nursing groups, because you're going to find, she said, that you're going to find that each nursing unit is different with different needs, and by rotating it, you will get to know each of them better and learn more about our nurses. Well, the first thing the nursing liaison told us was that they knew they had trouble with medical devices. They weren't confident in what their own educational people told them, because every nursing program has a nurse education group that teaches them about medical devices. And basically they show them the knobs and dials and how to use them, but they don't show them the idiosyncrasies of the devices. So they asked us if we would set up a program based upon our knowledge of what goes wrong and teach them. So we set up a program that for orientation of all new nurses on how to avoid common equipment problems, how to report failures, the easy way to contact us with questions, problems, and issues. And based on this, all incoming nurses began to see us as a different kind of department. They saw us as technical experts, not just people involved in repairing their equipment and doing planned maintenance. The next thing that happened was they came to us and said, we have a problem. We were at a children's hospital, and when parents would come in to visit their kids, they saw that nurses appeared to be always sitting around and writing. And of course, they were taking notes, tracking vital signs, and doing the tons of paperwork that nurses would do. But when they saw them sitting around, they felt, again, when parents and visitors saw nurses sitting around, they felt they were not spending enough time with patients. So they asked if there was something we could do to provide a portable writing service. So when they were in the patient's room, they could write. So what we did, we bought this tray. Actually, it's not a cafeteria tray. It's an industrial strength tray. It did a little machining and added this tray to our vital signs stand. And that allowed nursing to take notes right there in the patient room in front of the parents. And that solved that problem, that perception people had. So nursing began to call on us for many, many problems. And I'll give you 3 or 4 examples, and then we'll move on. But for instance, the ER staff was losing diagnostic sets. When the ER got busy, the wall-mounted diagnostic sets weren't sufficient. And they would issue them to the residents and doctors in the ER, but of course, those sets always went home in their pockets and never came back. So they said, can you make us a portable, which you see in the picture here on the right, a portable diagnostic set? And again, with a little bit of machining and mounting hardware on our standard IV pole, we created this diagnostic set that they could roll around the ER when it got very busy. Because, you know, in a kid's hospital, the emergency room fills up once the kids get out of school. It's dead during the day, but at night it is packed. So anyway, we created this roll-around stand. We even found a plug with a molded cord on it that when physicians or nurses unplugged it to roll it around to the next station, it would pop back up so it wouldn't drag on the floor where people could trip over it. More and more we were asked to do this kind of thing. The chief operating officer came to us and said the hospital looked terrible. She said the stretchers were disgusting. This was the first thing patients got put on when they were brought in. Was there something we could do about this? And my department did not maintain stretchers in any way. But she was right. Our stretchers are unattractive, rusty, and dirty looking. So I found a company in Miami that was FDA certified to maintain stretchers. And they said they repainted stretchers, so I asked if they could repaint in different colors. And they said they'd love to. So they created a pile of different color schemes, and our stretchers became fun-looking for our patients. We even had a contest for the kids in the hospital where we allowed them to design stretchers, and they designed rocket ships, racing cars, and this company painted them up the way the kids had designed them. It was a great fun project, and again, it changed the way we were perceived in the hospital because this was truly an augmented product, and we were problem solvers. We applied the same thing to the medication carts, and we got some fun-looking carts in the hospital. It made quite a difference. The one thing we tried, I love to point out, this was a failure. I had, down in Miami where we were working, of course we have the famous South Beach, and you could go out there in the evening and see kids on rollerblades that as they sped along the sidewalks, the wheels lit up. So I thought it would be a great idea to put light-up wheels on the IV poles, which we were getting painted up to look kind of jazzy. And the unfortunate thing, I mounted wheels on one of these IV poles and found out that I had to get it going about 10 miles an hour for the wheels to light up. So that project had to be canned because we couldn't have our kids running up and down the hallway with the IV poles. But it was a fun project, and we learned a lot from it. This group, research came to us and asked us if we could design things for them. What you see on the left with the baby is a chamber we designed for doing metabolic studies. It was a very elaborate climate-controlled chamber which took gases off and ran them through a gas chromatograph. But the thing about this was that we were invited to become members of the research department, meet every week with them, and any projects they needed we would design and build for them. This particular project received the largest single grant that our research department had ever received in its history. So again, these are augmented products. It all started with the nurse liaison asking if we could do something. So you never miss an opportunity to be creative and do something new. The unit on the right, as you all know, if you're parents, kids run fevers. And when they come into the hospital, they've got to knock that fever down as quickly as possible. Cincinnati makes these wonderful blanket troll systems. However, they're a little bit heavy for children. So the physicians asked us if we could design a system that blew cold air. So we modified a CSC unit with a heat exchanger that blew cold air, and we solved their problem of rapidly dropping down the temperature of febrile kids. So again, never look an opportunity or never run away from an opportunity because you'd be stunned at what it can grow into. The next program we started was called our Follow a Nurse program. And again, trying to learn more about our customer and working through the nurse liaison that we had. This program was each member of our department would follow a nurse for a morning or a day to see exactly what they did. And we went to various nursing units, ICU, NICU, med-surg, post-op, etc. Now, the role of the biomedical tech in following the nurse was just to take notes and learn what nurses do. not to interfere with the care in any way. They could ask questions, but the questions would be non-judgmental. In other words, you'd say, could you explain why you do that? Rather than, well, why are you doing it this way? There's a better way. You never be judgmental. You follow the nurse, learn what they're doing. Then immediately after following the nurse, you review what you learned at special department meetings while your knowledge is fresh. So the tech would come back and share what they learned from us. Finally, you reward participating nurses, and I'll talk about that in a second. But one of the very first times one of our techs followed a nurse, I love to tell this story because the nurse was entering a patient rooms, and she was carrying an oxygen saturation monitor. Just as she entered the room, she saw the child was about to take a dive out of his crib. So what did she do? She dropped the monitor and caught the kid. We all agreed when we heard that she did the right thing. If this was our child, this is precisely what we would have wanted her to do. But we also learned from that things happen sometimes that are beyond people's control. So when equipment gets damaged or other things, keep an open mind as to what's gone on, and don't be too quick to blame people. Now, I talked about rewarding participating nurses, and what we did is I pointed out on the left, don't forget the candy. Nurses love candy. They have a job that demands lots of carbs, so let them have them. But we also made the participating members, nurses, honorary members of the clinical engineering departments. It means absolutely nothing, but it was a fun thing to do. And you can buy these blank certificates at your local office, Staples Office Supply or Office Depot. Run them through your printer, and you can create a nice-looking certificate. I just happened to put someone else's signature on there that I thought might be a little more prominent. However, when we gave these out to nurses, I did put my signature on it. So don't hesitate to reward. Have a little fun with it. Make them honorary department members. Because we learned a lot from this program. We learned that nursing has to have a variety of skills. As our VP of Nursing had explained to us, there really is a vast difference between various nurses' departments. But we also learned that the pressure on nurses can be incredible. 1 minute everything is fine, and then the next second all hell breaks loose. And they have to perform, and it's a tough, tough job. And as I point down on the lower right-hand corner, sometimes they just have to chill out, because they can go through more stress in a week than you and I might see in a lifetime. So please understand that, and also understand that sometimes they can have bad days. And when they get stressed, just back off, as this person is saying. Leave quietly, and no one gets hurt. It happens. Don't take it personally. They have a tough job. I remember one of the first times I walked into a neonatal intensive care unit, and I could feel the sadness in the air. They had lost one patient that seemed like that everyone in that room seemed to adore. And that's a lot of stress on people. So please, please, please remember that their job is vastly different from ours. Whoops, I got lost here. Also, in fact, I wrote on my blog a few weeks ago, and dealing with improving relations with nursing, one of the most important committees I was ever a member of was the Nurse Practice Committee. And every one of your hospitals has a committee like this. They may call it by a different name, but it's the senior nurses, usually the masters prepared, and the nurse practitioners, who develop standards of care for the nursing department. Things are constantly shifting in nursing, and these people meet monthly to make sure their care standards are up to be the latest possible that they can be. Now, they need a technical advisor, and our role on that committee was to serve as the technical advisor to them. We were not there representing the biomedical department. It had nothing to do about repair. But I'll give you an example. Our primary job was to research new devices to help them with care. And the example, for instance, was, as you're probably aware, It's no secret we've got an obesity problem in this country. We've got children 10, 11, 12 years old weighing 190 pounds. And we discovered in our hospital that they were coming in and developing deep vein thrombosis, which is really a problem typically associated with adults. And of course, deep vein thrombosis can be disastrous to a patient if they have an embolism. So one of the things they asked me to do is to research devices to help them treat DVT or prevent DVT. So I went out into the marketplace and looked for various products that would do that. At the next meeting, I came back with 3 or 4 products that would do it, that would solve their problem of preventing DVTs. And then they selected 2 that they wanted to evaluate, so I arranged with the local marketing or salespeople from those companies to conduct the product evaluation. So with this all, and I would recommend you all ask to serve on this committee, but again, avoid doing it as a representative of your specific department. You're there to become their technical expert. But with this all also, salespeople began to see us in a different light. They began to see us as people who recommended products and arranged evaluations. So it was a great win-win situation for all of us. On a final note regarding nursing, I hate to bring this up, but I go to meetings and I hear people making ugly jokes about nurses. Never, never, never disrespect your customer. You're not trained as a nurse, and they're not trained as BMETs. Don't expect them to know about technology, and don't ridicule them for not knowing about it. We'd look pretty foolish doing many of the things that nurses do. In fact, the policy in our department, if we interviewed someone and heard them knock nursing, they weren't a candidate to work for us. That's how important this was to us. Your customer knows if you disrespect them, and they're not going to like it, and you shouldn't. Next thing I want to talk about in dealing with your customers is learning how to listen. We all listen through our ears. Of course, we're taught that from childhood. However, there's another way to listen, and that's by paying attention to problems as they crop up. And I think we've all had this problem. Devices come into your workshop for repair, and half the time there's very little information. There might be a piece of tape that says broken on it or something, or one of those string tags that says not working, but you don't always know what's wrong or who sent it in. You don't even know if it failed during patient use, which we thought was incredibly important. So listening to the customer in this case meant that our customer was telling us something. They just weren't speaking it. They were saying, we don't know how to inform you of what's wrong with the devices. So we sat down with our nurse liaison again and developed a repair tag. And this is what came out of it. This was a tag that's perhaps 3 by 5, 3 by 4 inches. It was a stick-on tag, and we'll talk about that in a second. But basically, it gave them a place to put their name, department, extension, and shift, as you can see. It allowed a little checkbox for them to state what was wrong with it. So they didn't have to come up with something. If there was something other than what was checked there, they could write it in. They could tell us if it failed on a patient. And this bottom line was, we asked them if they would like a copy of the repair report. Now, in talking with nurses, we found that some of them had no idea really what happened to equipment when they marked that it was broken and needed repair. If you've got a hospital with 600 or 700 infusion pumps, and a nurse finds one that isn't working and sends it in for repair, then the next day that same nurse gets another one that isn't working. They don't know if the one they sent in the day before was repaired or they got the same one back. They don't know the process. So anyway, we created a little program in Microsoft Access that if a nurse indicated that they would like a copy of the repair report, in this Access program, we would generate a little letter that says, "Dear Sadie, thank you for notifying us of the problem with the fill in the blank." And then you said it did such and such, and we would write, here is what we did, and then say we tested it, and it's now working up to factory standards, and replace the floor. Thank you for helping us in bringing better quality devices to your patients, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what we did. It made a difference because nurses felt we really cared by providing these reports for them, and it was no extra work for us. Now, I put a couple of things. As I mentioned, this was a stick-on tag. We had this made up by a local label company. And if you don't know this, you'll know it now. If you make up a tag like this, you can buy adhesives in various levels of aggressiveness. You can make them so aggressive that you can't get the tag off, and you've got to use an ice scraper or dynamite to get them off. Or you can make them so unaggressive it'll be like a sticky note and fall off. You want an aggressiveness that's enough to make it stay on. And your label people should know about this. If they don't, you've got the wrong label people. You want enough aggressiveness to make it stay on the device, but not enough that it leaves a pile of residue and makes extra work for you when you take it off. Now, I put a little note in red up there that says, note color. As a kid's hospital, I didn't want parents coming in to the hospital and seeing devices that says danger, do not use in bright red or skull and crossbones. I wanted a tag that was somewhat innocuous, and we thought a blue color would be best to do that. So anyway, that's why I put a note about the color. Well, we provided these free to the nursing staff and OR and all the different areas. Yes, we printed them up at our expense, but it was well worth the effort. Now, the first month, we had only about 4% of these were filled out correctly, so someone in the department suggested we have a lottery. And we put all the tags that were filled out correctly in a hat, and we made notification of this again to our nurse liaison. This was an incredible asset to get information back and forth. We had a monthly lottery. All tags that were filled out correctly would go into a hat. And at the end of the month, we'd draw tags out, and the winning tags would win prizes. The first month, as I say, we got only 4% compliance. The second month, we got 84%. This program now is part of the DNA of the hospital. Every department uses this, and it's been in place, I'm guessing it's about 20 years. So, as I say, it's part of the hospital's DNA now. And it was a win-win situation. We made it easier for our customer to identify problems. They got feedback when they wanted, and we got great information. We knew obviously what failed, but we knew where, by department, by shift. We knew if it failed on a patient, which, as I say, I felt that was very important. We also could generate reports for the education department. If we felt a particular shift or area needed strengthening because they were having a special problems, we could tell the nursing ed department to focus on them rather than as they would normally be required to do, which is to shotgun the whole hospital. Other things concerning listening to your customer, maybe I can stop for a minute, John, and ask, are there any questions come in that I need to be answering?
You know, Frank, actually one came through regarding nurse liaisons. The question was, how do you approach the nursing staff in the hospital about assigning a nurse liaison for the biomed department if the hospital does not currently have one?
Well, yeah, I'd be glad to hear that some hospitals may have one. I would make an appointment straight to the VP of nursing. I believe in going up to the top. If the VP of nursing knows that you care to learn more and work closer with her nurses or his nurses, they're going to love you for that. Go right to the top. And that way when the order comes down from them to nurses, it'll make a world of difference. Always go to the top.
Okay, great. That's the one question for now.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep moving. As I mentioned, some communication is nonverbal. One of the things, and I'm sure you've all had this happen to you, you'll get a call from someone, they just received a new product, and they can't make it work. Then you go down and you find out it's missing components, or they didn't order all the accessories. Well, they're telling you something beyond the fact that they can't make it work. they're telling you that equipment is complicated, and although this is a picture of a satellite receiving system, equipment is complicated today, and they don't always know exactly what to order. This taught us something, and this gave us an opening. We said to people like this, let us order for you. You don't have to do this. We know all the little parts you need. So what we did was we started writing the orders for these departments whenever they wanted to buy something. This happens to be a copy of our old purchase order. It's now all electronic. But back then, when they wanted to buy something, we would physically write the order. Now remember, this is an augmented service. We're thinking out of the box, just like General Motors. It's more than making cars. We not only wrote the order for them, we walked it through the approval process. You notice it has senior officer approval, VP budget. We walked it through, and if the VPs asked us what we were doing, we told them we were providing this extra service for our customer departments because they didn't understand the technology, and in the interest of efficiency, we wanted to make sure they got everything right the first time. This meant that the VPs began to see us also, that began to see this augmented service and see us as someone who could work through on capital budget problems and learn what to order. This got so big that when it came capital budget time, departments started calling on us to find out what they needed, what they should order, how much they should budget. And I did join MD Byline and ECRI so I would have accurate pricing information to be able to give them for their budgetary purposes. This went on, and after about 3 or 4 years, we were presenting the actual budget for all of the nursing departments. The nursing felt we knew more about what they needed than they did, and so every year to senior management, we'd present a 1 and 3 and 5 year budget plan. Now, for those of you who complain that equipment comes into the hospital and you don't know anything about it, you can see by all of these things we were doing, we gradually became the equipment people. And the manufacturers began to see what we were doing, and they started coming to us. There was no problem with them avoiding us because they saw we were part of the process. So another problem, and I think this will be the last of this group, one of the technicians, when we were starting our program at Miami Children's, one of the technicians came to me and said, you know, there's a lot of equipment out on the floors that nobody uses. So we went out and asked department heads, what is this with equipment being on the floor and you're not using it? Because we had to inventory it and we had to PM it. They said that the paperwork process for disposing of old equipment was too cumbersome and they really didn't know how to use it. So that it was easier for them to keep the equipment hanging around in their department than to dispose of it. So what we did is we said, well, let us write off and dispose it for you. We'll do the paperwork. Because once you've done this a few times, it's a piece of cake. So we did the paperwork. One, it removed it from inventory for us, so it was a few less items we had to carry. Second, we got this old equipment for parts because, as I mentioned before, we were doing a lot of design work, and there's nothing like those old valves and relays and all kinds of things that this old equipment you can use when you're building prototypes. The other thing it gave us for equipment that was working well but just was no longer useful to the hospital, it allowed us to donate. And I'll give you an example of how this worked to our benefit. There was a major fire down in Uruguay, and the Uruguayan consulate came to us and asked if we had any old medical equipment we could get down there through their ambassadorial delegation to help the people, because I don't know how many hundreds of people were harmed in this fire, and the Uruguayan government was just overwhelmed. So they asked us if we had old equipment, and we said yes, we did, and we donated it to the consulate to be sent down to Uruguay. Now, what he did was, one, he wrote a letter to the editor thanking us specifically, our department, for our assistance. He wrote a letter to the CEO thanking the CEO for our cooperation with them. So you can see how this benefits. Again, it's all about how you are perceived, and we became, it changed the way our CEO viewed us anyway. And another thing that happens.
We do have a quick question, Frank, if you don't
Sure.
mind.
Sure.
How could this process be changed to accommodate the new paradigm of ACA?
I'm not sure what ACA means, so if they could explain that.
Affordable Care Act? Maybe the Affordable
okay.
Care Act?
This particular process,
yes.
The only thing I can see is, particularly if you're fully aware of the capital budget, you can redistribute this equipment to other departments, and you can let them know it's available. And if you're on your capital budget committee, when somebody's making a proposal that they need a such and such, maybe a department needs a defibrillator or who knows what, an O2 sat monitor, and you've got some, you might be able to give it to that department to use, as opposed to capitalizing it and buying a new piece. So that might be one way that it would work. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Looks like it is. If not, he'll ask the next one. Continue.
Okay, shoot. Do you have another one, John?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay, and the other thing we did with this old equipment, now I know your risk management department doesn't like you giving out equipment, but sometimes we do things that they don't always have to know about. Frequently, a physician would come to me and tell me they had a patient that really needed to go home, but they needed a particular type of monitoring device. And the parents, I know in one case, the dad was working 2 jobs, the mom was working an extra job. They could barely meet their mortgage payments and their hospital bills, and they needed this equipment badly to get their child back home. And the doctor said, is there anything you can do, Frank? And I said, well, I'm not allowed to give equipment to patients. However, if a piece of this old equipment happened to show up in your office and you didn't know where it came from, no one's going to be any the wiser, and if you want to give it to the patient, that's your business. And so there were a number of times we did this for physicians. So we had this little conspiracy going, I should say, with them. But it worked very nicely to our benefit because, again, physicians began to see us in a whole new light. The other thing, again, working through your nurse liaison, and I know many of your departments already do this, you do regular rounds in the departments, but work through your nurse liaison and do this. Set up regular rounds where you check equipment condition, where nurses understand what you're doing. So if they have questions when they see you, they can ask them on the spot. You can keep an eye out for abnormal conditions of use. You can also check the code cards, make sure the defibrillators are being charged. But it gives you lots of visibility right there on the nursing units, and that gets you more oriented towards the clinical side. And again, I keep talking about it, changes the way you are perceived in the hospital. And this is an important thing, to be visible in the clinical areas. Excuse me. We'll go on to the next topic now, which is, in all of this, it's important to start thinking like your customer, not about your department and the silo that you live in, but think about your customer's problems, think about their goals, and think about ways you can help them get the job done, ways you can help them become more efficient in their work and more effective in their work. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. You can, I put this up because you have to start thinking about how department heads manage, particularly when you're dealing with folks like imaging and lab. I know a lot of you want to get in there and do service, but understand things from their perspective. One, department heads of that ilk have to be very risk averse. They can't take any risk because precise results are very important to the diagnosis that doctors are waiting for. They're always under pressure from the medical staff. There's no tolerance for delayed results. So efficiency, again, and effectiveness, which I think are the most important things that we can offer a hospital, efficiency or effectiveness are very important to department heads. They do, as you all know, want to control the service process, and they want to select the service vendor. Because they can't trust everybody, and they, as I say, they can't take risk. They're always going to avoid customer complaints. If a physician complains to a CEO that the lab is not getting the results on time or that imaging is botching something, the CEO hates that. They don't like complaints from doctors, and they're going to come to the department head and want follow-up, and they can be unmerciful, the department heads. So remember, again, think about how the customer is feeling, what their attitude is. They're always under budgetary pressure, and as most of you may know, the bonuses of most hospital managers are dependent upon meeting their budget, and also their salary increases depending upon meeting their budget. So they can't take risks fiscally. When you want to get them to go in there and drop maintenance agreements, think about that all the time. Just the fact that you claim you can save them money isn't always going to be the right answer for them, because they've got a lot else on their mind. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is vendors. They're a part of the technology team. We tend to forget that, and I know a lot of biomedical people don't like salespeople. Well, folks, they bring the technology to the hospital, plain and simple. So I'd advise you to work with them to improve your customers' experience. They keep you informed of the new technologies that they're working on, of changes that are happening in the industry. They certainly know very well what the clinical needs are, because their devices are being developed to meet clinical needs. As I say, they can keep you aware of new developments, and they can assist in setting up product evaluations. And most importantly, vendors talk to your customers. So if you're hostile towards vendors, remember, when they go in and talk to your customers, they may not say the nicest things about you. And they have skills that you don't have. They can help your reputation, or they can hurt your reputation. They know how to make things happen, and they know how to reach influential people. A vendor can come into a town, maybe never have seen that hospital in their life, and within 2 weeks, they're having dinner with the CFO or the chief of radiology. They've got these skills. And if you're hostile towards them, it can make a world of difference when they're in front of the very influential people that you're spending a lot of your time trying to figure out how to reach. And if they're putting in a good word for you, as I say, it matters. One of the things we did with our vendors is we created a Vendor of the Year award. And again, I used those stock sheets we got from Office Depot and ran them through our laser printer, and we created the Vendor of the Year certificate for outstanding customer service awarded by the Clinical Engineering Department, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you do this, you always send a cover letter and you aim high. I mentioned aiming high when dealing with the VP of nursing. Always send it to the CEO, not to the local salesman. CEOs love to hear when their company is doing well. They thrive on that because they get a lot of complaints. But send a letter, and our letter said something like, congratulations, you have been named Vendor of the Year award by the Miami Children's Hospital Clinical Engineering Department. We just did it as a department, so I didn't have to get permission from anybody in the hospital or public relations or anything like that. And in the cover letter, we said, you know, we're only as good as the people who support us. And your support has been outstanding, so it's allowed us to provide outstanding service to our customers. Thank you. And in that letter, we listed specific employees who are responsible for that award. Now, you'd think it wouldn't make a difference, but let me give you an example of some things that happened. I got a call from the president of Medtronics. Now, Medtronics is, well, probably one of the world's largest manufacturers out there of strictly medical type devices. And he called me and he thanked me for the award. And he also said, Frank, could you do me a favor? Could you send me another certificate? We framed the first one you sent us, and that hangs in our executive offices, but we'd like to put another one across the street in our plant. I mean, this is the president of Medtronics. This is how much it meant to him. So naturally, we sent another one off to him. We got a call, MDE, back there. I don't think they're in existence anymore. President of MDE called, thanked us for the award. He flew out from California to us in South Florida, met with us, excuse me, talked to us about new devices they were working on, changes they were making to their products. And one of the things he did, which I especially loved, he met with all the technicians, and he said, what is it you like and don't like about our product? Is there anything you would like to see changed? And our technicians had some changes. Particularly, there was a switching network on their power and charging systems that was a nightmare. It caused a lot of problems with nursing. They brought this up to him. He called about a month later when he got back home, and he thanked us. He said, we're removing that switch and getting rid of that problem. So thank you for bringing it to our attention. So if you think an award like this wouldn't make a difference, it does. And the final story about the Vendor of the Year award, we had a local repairman who did incubators for us. He was outstanding. And one year we made Air Shields the Vendor of the Year, and we sent the letter to the CEO of Air Shields mentioning this particular technician for the great work he had done for us. Well, about a month after we sent the letter, the technician came into my office and thanked me for the award. He said, Frank, you won't believe what happened. He said, I got a call one morning from the president of the company. Now, this technician is down in Florida. The president's up in Pennsylvania. He said, I got a call one morning for the president, and he wanted to see me up in Pennsylvania at the home office. He said, I thought I was being fired, but when I got there, he introduced me to the entire home office staff and thanked me for being responsible for the Vendor of the Year award. He said also, he took me to dinner that night. He said, I can't believe, and he said, all of that because of you selecting us as Vendor of the Year. Well, you realize our relationship with him was incredibly strong after that. We could do nothing wrong. So it can make a difference. This little award, it's just a piece of paper and a letter, but wow, you'd be surprised what can happen. So with vendors, don't fight with them. Show them the same courtesy as you would any customer. One of the services we provided too, you know, when you're doing in-services and vendors have to come in, sometimes they're there for 3 or 4 days, working around the clock, training your nurses on new devices. We negotiated through our purchasing department at the local hotels, and we had an elegant hotel right in Coral Gables. We got reduced hotel prices for them. It was just a little service. In fact, if they wanted, we would make their reservation, although most of them didn't trust us to do that. We also put a little packet together. Since we did have the famous South Beach in our neighborhood, we put a packet together of the hot spots, because these are young people, and they're going to be busy working hard with our nursing and medical staffs. We wanted to have them fun in their spare time, so we sent them a little packet in advance with a letter welcoming them to Miami. And these were places they might want to go, great places to have dinner, etc. Just another service you could provide to your vendor and strengthen that bond so that you're all part of the same team working together. So any questions, John, before we move on?
We had one quick one about how do you feel about SMOCs, certifications, and badges?
Okay, that's coming up.
Okay, good. Great minds think alike. Carry on.
I don't have the certification thing in there, but my feeling on certification is it may be different than most others. I don't think it's necessary. I appreciate it when a technician is certified, and that certainly gives them a leg up on an interview, but I'll talk a little bit about the kind of technician I prefer to have. Certification is nice, certainly has never been a requirement for me. I think if we're going to certify anything, we ought to certify departments, because our problem is not with the quality of technicians. I hate to say this to many of you people out there listening. Quality is, for the most part, with the quality of our managers. We should be certifying them in their departments. Anyway, let me move on. These are now about things you can do specifically in your department. At your monthly department meetings, customer service should always be a preeminent topic. And again, you're going to have a nurse liaison, hopefully, at this department meeting. And you can discuss with them and the technicians difficult situations that may have cropped up, things that happened that people didn't like, better ways to handle them or avoid them in the future, particular problems that your staff or nursing staff may have had, and you can suggest remedies. Always ask how you can be better. And one other thing is I would urge everyone in your departments to keep an eye out for what others do better. Maybe they had their washing machine repaired, and they noticed the washing machine repairman did something unique. Talk about that. I know I had my AC repaired recently, and the AC technician gave me his business card. He said, my company's a big company, and they would prefer, if you like, that you can call me directly if you have a problem, because our customers don't like having to go through all those telephone answering systems with press 1 if this, press 2 is that. I thought that was fantastic. Just a little thing that someone did a little bit better than we did. So keep an eye out, and when you see someone doing something better, talk about it and make a difference. Now, when you're hiring people, again, the certification is as important to me as hiring people with great people skills. Do they like to help others? Are they honest and transparent? Can they empathize with a customer? And do they know how to communicate? I know there's a lot of great technicians out there. We're fortunate in our field. We probably have some of the best trained people in any industry. But some of them have terrible communication skills. And in my departments, I like to hire people who know how to communicate. And you can start with a telephone interview. If they don't have good telephone skills, they're probably not going to work well in front of physicians and nurses. And do they have common courtesy and good manners? Because it's all about attitude. Never settle for mediocrity. Hire the best that you can. It'll make a world of difference. Now, some of the things you can do. You can expand your hours of operation at no extra charge to your hospital. How do you do that? It's simple. Flex time. I'm sure you have technicians in your department who love to come in early and go home early to avoid the traffic. I had someone, if he'd love to show up at 3 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 in the morning and go home at 3 in the afternoon, beat the traffic. It was wonderful. Let him do it. And I'll tell you why, because I had also employees who like to play hard at night. So they prefer to come in at 9 in the morning and go home at 6:30 or 7 at night. And that was fine, because now I could keep my department open 12 hours a day with no overtime. And let my customers know that. We're now open 12 hours a day to serve you better, even though we're really doing it for our own technicians. But our customers appreciated the extra hours, and our employees appreciated that they could name their own hours. So this was truly a win-win situation. If you do this, just make sure you have a core period of time where everyone is there so you can have meetings and disseminate information. Another thing, and I mentioned I put this in as a result of my air conditioning man, facilitate communication. Make it easy for customers to find you. Make sure all your techs have business cards that they hand out to various nursing units and physicians. And if you want to have fun with it like these people are doing, do it. You want to build strong personal connections between your technicians and your customers, because you want to get out of the loop if you're a manager. Let your customer talk directly to the person who's going to go up there and help them. And as I say, feel free to have fun with it if you're making up business cards, but make sure your technicians all do have cards. Also, any documents you read about respecting your customer and earning customer respect is you first have to show, and this is where the smocks come in, You first have to show that you respect yourself. If your department doesn't dress well, and I know that these guys aren't biomedicals, one of them's obvious a plumber, but people aren't going to respect you unless you show them that you actually respect yourself. So dress properly, and I know there's departments that love to wear those, the greens, the scrub suits, and unfortunately, if you put on clean starch scrub suits every morning, that's fine, but I've gone into departments where it looked like people had pajamas that they had been sleeping in for a month. That's not professional, folks. Make a difference and look professional in your dress. And I believe very strongly in, yes, the lab coats. They make a difference because remember, when you walk through the hospital, visitors are also looking at you, and they want to know what that person was doing in there. You've got an infant in an incubator. What's this strange-looking person doing looking at the incubator? Look professional. Yes, and make name tags. In fact, I love to have employees design their own name tags, but make sure the name is prominent so that people know who they're talking to. Very important. If you go with the lab coat route, which I strongly recommend, it'll keep your employees from, getting their blood or whatever on their clothing, but it just looks nice. Now, I want to talk a little bit about branding and how your department is organized. Excuse me, how people visualize your department. There's two pictures of automobiles here, and most people with a discerning eye realize that one is a Toyota Camry and one is a Lexus ES350 series. Why I have these pictures both shown here is most people know that they're really the same car. We used to kid that a Mercury was a Ford with lock washers, and essentially an ES350 Lexus is a Camry, perhaps with more than lock washers. But why do you suppose Toyota has a Lexus and a Toyota automobile brand name? Well, one reason is when Toyota wanted to make an upscale car that they could sell for $60,000 or $80,000, they knew that no one would buy an $80,000 Toyota from the same company that makes the $15,000 Toyota Yaris. So they created a whole new brand, all new dealership, new name, everything different. We still know it's Toyota, but somehow there's prestige associated with Lexus, and people were willing to pay more. I mean, it was a popular thing to do. Honda did it with Acura, Nissan with Infiniti, and other car companies. But the thing is, it's all about branding. Now, how does this apply to you? Well, when you're organizing your department, or if you have problems in the department with perception, and I use this at the moment, you're trying to be perceived as a high-tech department. But if you've got people repairing beds and stretchers, wheelchairs, what do others perceive of the skill level of these people? That man repairing the wheelchair is probably superb at what he does, and I don't want to in any way denigrate his skills. However, if you're asking the manager of the imaging department to repair their MRI, and this is what they're used to seeing, they're going to say, no way will that person go near my MRI. So why I tell you this is create a different brand. Using the same management, everything, create an electromechanical repair department. Separate the two so that now you will have a high-tech biomedical end and electromechanical end. We did this, and it worked out very, very efficiently. I didn't do this at Children's because we didn't do beds and wheelchairs, but I did this at another hospital, and it was very, very effective because we could help people with their electromechanical problems but not get caught up with the high-tech areas that we were trying to get moved into. So the benefit of branding was all we required was a separate phone number, and we answered that phone with electromechanical repair department. We could hire separate people for the high-tech department, and we could hire separate people for the electromechanical. It allowed us to grow better from a high-tech perspective, and it allowed us to give better customer service on the electromechanical end and hire employees specific for that type of equipment, because you don't need a BMET to maintain a wheelchair. Not necessary. So we could hire two different types of people. We could fit our salary levels more appropriately, and we didn't have to have more one-size-fits-all with all BMET level 1, 2, 3, etc. World of difference in how we were perceived. So think about that. Branding can be very important. Also, remember to survey. On an annual basis, send out a survey to your departments. Send a cover letter, always a cover letter saying something to the effect, we are interested in providing great customer service. We want feedback, good, bad, indifferent from you. Tell us how we can be better. This is another way of you letting your customer know that you care about them. So remember to survey. So in summation, establish a department goal, and that goal should be customers who believe that you're dedicated to providing them with the very best possible service. Second, augment your services. Think out of the box and do things that no one else does. Something that's especially unique, and you'll find that this can be great fun and lead to so many other things. Get to know your customer. Get that nursing liaison on board. Learn to listen. Look for opportunities. Everything is an opportunity. Don't forget your vendors. Make them a part of your team. So keep customer service at the forefront of your department. Always hire for excellence. And thank you for the opportunity to present this. I'll appreciate your thoughts, comments, and if you have ideas or suggestions, we present these kinds of things regularly. You can send them to me at this Gmail address. It's yours now, John.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I got a couple questions, Frank.
Sure thing.
First one, concerning preventative maintenance, how do you feel about the concept of PMing until it does not break? And how about performance-centered maintenance?
Yeah, performance-centered maintenance, I'm a great believer in, number one. Yeah, you should be keeping records and knowing what fails and why, and basing your maintenance on that, and not necessarily on some schedule. I used to kid people and say, somehow we took the amount of time it takes for the Earth to rotate around the sun, and we've decided that should be our maintenance schedule. There's no relationship between time and failure, and we've learned that over time. So yes, definitely performance-based maintenance, and I'd keep good records and analyze them on a regular basis.
Okay. Next one. Did your department wear standardized apparel?
Yes, we did. We wore lab coats, and my people wore ties. Don't forget, I'm a lot older than everybody in this field, and I grew up in an era when I did field service. I wore a suit, so that, yeah, I come from a different generation, but I think definitely the lab coats, although my staff did wear ties.
So if you were around today, Frank, what would you want to put your department in? What kind of apparel?
I'd have them in lab coats. I'd take off the ties. I might even stop wearing one.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how happy your people would be if you made them wear ties, Frank.
Well, in one department, I took over a department, and you know, if you wear suits to work every day, you wind up with hundreds of ties. And I brought a bag full of ties in. I had to teach some people how to tie them. But this was back in the 70s. And they all learned how to tie ties, and they got some very, very nice looking ties out of it. But yes, I would not make them wear them today, but again, have to dress professionally.
Well, okay, that concludes today's webinar. Frank, just wanted to thank you again for your wisdom you shared with everybody. If you want to catch Frank, he'll be speaking regularly at our Tech Nation webinar Wednesdays, as well as teaching classes at our upcoming MD Expos. And if you think Frank is great on the internet, he's even better in person, so you can really learn a lot from him. I wanted to remind everybody that a post-webinar survey will appear on your screen immediately once today's webinar ends. Filling out and submitting this survey is the only way to receive your CE credits for participation. We will email you your CE certificate within 1 week of today's event. And as always, we want to thank you all for your continued support of TechNation and Wednesday webinars. Guys, have a great rest of the day.